We are excited to have an amazing group of panelists today to talk about communities for customer-centric organizations. In times of both prosperity and uncertainty, communities are an enduring way to bring the customer's voice into an organization well beyond our call centers. Truly delivering on customer centricity means gaining so much more than feedback to concepts, but also to understanding what customers value when they do business with us. And also to being in front of micro trends and behavioral shifts that will ultimately impact business decisions from product development to marketing strategy. We are here today with a group of panelists who are at the forefront of communities to join us in a lively discussion, talking about ROI, business impact, and customer journeys. Amy, why don't you start us off and introduce yourself?
Great. Hi, my name is Amy Brazel. I am a brand and advertising research manager at General Motors. I've been with the company for almost 24 years, and believe it or not, and communities have been a part of my research toolbox for at least 20 of those years. So I have been very involved in communities and have relied on them for customer information.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for being with us here today. Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben Jordan, and I've been a generalist researcher at the Clorox company. I'm now in my 16th year, most of which I spent on the Burt's Bees business, but now I'm in the Center of Excellence where I help facilitate best practice research sharing across the brands and conduct training. And I have a specialty in agile tools and research practices.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us here today, Ben. Laura?
I'm Laura Muzinski. I'm an account strategist at Gongos, and my love affair with communities started about 15 years ago when we first started using them as a tool. Since then, I've been executing and developing strategies for them across our range of diversified clients and helping them really make customer centricity happen within their organizations through that tool.
Thank you, Laura. I'm Polly Spiros. I'll be moderating our panel today. So let's get started. I'm going to ask, I'll pitch this to Ben first. So we talk about customer centricity, and that means a lot of different things. Ben, can you describe what customer centricity means to you?
Sure. At the Clorox company, we talk about it being human-centered, really as a foundation for all marketing practices. And really, it's just getting beyond the what in decision making. So really understanding emotional behaviors, drivers of decision making, and making sure that consumers are at the center of decision making. So there are definitely business reasons to make a decision. There's supply chain reasons to make decisions, but you really best have your customers at the center of those decisions as well, and making sure you really understand the voice that they're bringing to the table, and that really enables just better growth, better products, better decisions.
Great, thank you. Amy, customer centricity at GM, what does that mean to you?
I mean, for us, the customer really is at the center of everything that we do. Research is really valued at our company, and we do a lot of it. And having customers, we're always trying to sell products, but it's having that feedback from the people who are your customers and making sure that you're still meeting their needs, and pitching new ideas to them to make, because they already know a lot about who you are and what you represent and what you offer, but, making that experience and making those products even better, and having their input is really essential.
Thank you. And Laura, so customer centricity, I would love for you now to bring the community perspective in to the customer centricity lens.
Yeah, well, I think there are a few dimensions when we think about customer centricity. It's easy to narrow in on that term customer, but it comes to life in different ways. So that might mean communities with the shopper. It might mean communities with the end user. It could be anyone within that value chain that we owe the honor of incorporating their feedback and their voice into what we do, as well as, when we're facilitating a community, thinking about not just down to that end user, but also up the other direction and say, well, my customer is also my client's stakeholder. And so how can we think about both of those perspectives and really serving them in a way that respects their needs?
So communities and customer centricity. Amy, I know you do a lot of work with OnStar. So you're in touch with your customers all the time, both in the moment of need as well as way ahead in the value chain. Could you describe a little bit of how communities fit into your lens of customer centricity at GM?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've used lots of different types of communities over the years, but the one that I'm most involved with right now is with OnStar subscribers, because that's a big part of our business. And we use them to sort of vet new concepts. What could we do to improve the service, to make it better for you? So we're constantly throwing out concepts and new ideas to them to see what they think, to get their opinion and feedback. How can we make it better? And then the other thing that we've really started using the communities more for is, it's not just about, sending them a survey or doing online brainstorming and things like that. We've actually kind of taken it a step further, and we've done a lot of recruiting to do in-person one-on-ones with some of our community members, focus groups with some of our members. So we're actually seeing them and, talking to them more directly than we have in the past. It's not just through the community platform anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. So an ongoing dialogue and engagement with your customers. So Ben, at Clorox and in the work that you do, how do you drive sort of customer centricity engagement with your customers within the context of communities?
Yeah, so communities have always been a great way to iterate, but the advancements in research technology have really pushed what you're able to do with communities these days. And so I would say, building on what Amy said, so iteration with your direct consumers that know they're interacting with a brand can be really valuable. So getting some of your favorite consumers to review products, review advertising, iterate on ideas, that's great. But we've really broadened our use of communities. So we have communities just around category users or just around people who sort of enjoy certain activities. And we'll really engage in more sort of lifestyle discussions, understanding really motivations about what's driving, broader behaviors that don't relate just directly to our products. Specifically, having just gone through COVID and everything that happened in America, I mean, our communities were a real lifeline because all plans got thrown up in the air. Everything you thought you understood about your business got thrown up in the air, and really having communities to be able to probe on all sorts of lifestyle questions, really understand how the pandemic is affecting people, attitudes, fears, and how that relates to things that are more relevant to your business as well. But it was just a great, great lifeline. We really flooded our senior management with really understanding what our consumers were going through, real stories, through these communities, using a lot of the new technology, virtual focus groups, one-on-ones, surveys, diaries, all those kinds of things that you're able to do.
So thank you. You bring up a really, really interesting angle about communities. Laura, I'd love for you to just comment on, how has technology changed our interaction with customers, whether it be in a community environment or ways that we can engage with our customers as a result of technological advances?
Yeah, well, in a large way, video has been the most drastic change. I mean, when I think back to early days of communities, it was very much, small polls and text only. We didn't even have smartphones. The ability to get images even from your digital camera and download them to your desktop and upload them into the site. I mean, that was a task to get people to, think in that way and operate in that way. And now it's so fluid. It's almost easier for them to communicate in video and image than it is in words. And so I think just really encouraging that has been a major change. And then making sure that we're not just listening and analyzing, but infusing that into the stories that we're sharing back with stakeholders so they can feel as if they were hearing it directly, they were there, they understand, a picture's worth 1,000 words and not just our, top line summary of what it means.
Laura, you bring up some really interesting ideas about all of a sudden the researcher is able to bring the voice of the customer into the brand enterprise as a result of some of the technology that's now available to us. And also it's a video, verbatims, very compelling when you can hear the voice of your customer in their own words, as opposed to a 40-page PowerPoint deck, right? So Amy, both you and Ben are in huge organizations, very large, multifaceted organizations. Can you describe how you've been able to leverage, Amy, some of the tools and engagement opportunities in a community to tell a story to your internal stakeholders or leadership at GM to help you drive initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've tried everything over the years. And we've worked with Gongos so closely to make sure as the new tech emerges that we're always there to try it. But I think the most vivid examples that I have more recently are doing some one-on-ones with consumers. Technology has now allowed us to, with smartphones, we actually did Zoom calls with consumers while they were in their vehicle and had them actually, kind of almost do like usability. We had them actually experience, something in their vehicle and got their real-time reaction to it and their real feedback. And then we were able to take video clips from that to leadership, and it actually ended up changing the direction of where they were going with this new product because people were struggling with it. People were saying things using their voice and the automated system wasn't recognizing it. And they were sure that the system was perfect until they saw the customers actually struggling with it and unable to get what they wanted out of it. So those I think are some good examples. And then also I think just the brainstorming activities that we've done more recently. We've done a lot of online discussion brainstorming, which we find really helpful. And then what we do is we consolidate those insights from the brainstorming. And then we have been formulating surveys then that sort of dig deeper into, hey, here's what you guys all said in terms of what we could do next with this product. Now here's our engineers have come up with these ideas. Now what do you think about these ideas? And we get a more quantitative reaction to them.
Thank you. That's great. Those are all really compelling examples. Ben, I know Clorox has been, and especially you in your role, you've been really committed to making sure the voice of the customer sort of tentacles throughout the organization. Can you give some examples of ways that you've informed internal stakeholders, your leadership of the voice of the customer, using community tools, community engagement opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially in the research industry, we understand how important storytelling is in delivering results. And really what I think, building on a lot of what's been said, with the ability to get video, the ability to get images out of communities, it really enables, latest ways of storytelling. So embedding small clips into research decks, really bringing images to life. So instead of traditional surveys where you ask a question and you sort of just have a laundry list, you can ask people to send you back photos of the things you're talking about, and really being able to just illustrate much more vividly the points you're trying to make through traditional meeting and feedback, cadence. So even if you're working with research vendors outside your community, or you're doing work that isn't even related to a specific task, we're able to then sort of parallel things in our communities to help augment what's being done outside. So really, that blend of quant and qual is really powerful from the communities, and it really comes to life through images, quick videos. Specifically, we, in the past, it's been a little different with everybody out of the office, but we tend to have big television screens throughout the office where we will publicize consumer videos and some of our just consumer learnings. There's always on sort of information, and the stuff that you're able to get from the communities as STEM to put back and sort of share with the organization is definitely a spotlight tactic that we use.
So Laura, I'm curious, we've had some conversations previous to this panel, and one of the things that came up that was really interesting is, we want stakeholders to be involved in our communities. We want them to interact. There's probably an appropriate level of interaction, right? Because all of a sudden, sometimes parts of the organization like, wait, we have a customer community. You have access to our customers. What is what's the right kind of threshold for how much stakeholder interaction can happen in a community? And what are some kind of best practices with regard to involving stakeholders in your organization, whether that be marketing or UX or product? What are some things that we should keep in mind when giving stakeholders access to our communities?
Yeah, well, I think it's really first assessing organizational readiness. Where are you in terms of maturity on understanding that insights exist, how insights operate in terms of best practices, and then developing a journey for our internal customers, meeting them where they are to bring them along and match the appropriate amount of interaction with where that organization and individuals who are on different journeys within that organization are today. So that means more education, more training, hand-holding, areas where we can let them stretch and engage without compromising the research, compromising the comfort level of the members within that community. And so that can mean things as simple as, for example, taking some of these insights, videos, images, and bringing it into activation sessions with those clients. So they may not have the firsthand interaction with the consumer yet, but we're helping them think about how to integrate the insights in their job in a day-to-day interactive fashion, all the way to saying, gosh, if you're quite skilled and you're comfortable doing so, and we talk about the appropriate ways to do it, maybe a UX researcher is directly doing one-on-one interviews through the platform with participants that have been recruited. So I think we need to think about how to make it appropriate before we dive in and give people access.
So Amy, you mentioned to us and shared that some of your UX decision making was driven by having access to the community and actually seeing customers interact with the product. What best practices would you share with individuals who are running the community? You've run a lot of communities over the years, and I remember you saying in our discussion before, well, you're gonna really have to monitor that, how much access. It's like, oh, we have a community, we have customers. What do you do to make sure you can manage that?
I mean, we're pretty. We don't let them get too close. It's a healthy distance with the customer. We want to make sure, I think like what Laura said, you want to make sure that you are, taking care of your community members. You don't want them to have to sit through a barrage of questions that doesn't make sense or something. You want to make sure that their experience is a good one. And so having a professional point of view, right, like a professional researcher saying, you know what, this is the best way to ask this question, and sort of doing some interpretation from some of our internal stakeholders, I think is really important. And that's really what we do. I can't think of an instance where I've let an engineer go directly to a customer and ask them a question, because you know what, an engineer is going to use words that customer probably isn't going to understand. And sometimes those questions could be leading because the engineer already has something in his mind that he wants the customer to talk about, or kind of wants his idea to be the thing that it comes to mind, or is is more beneficial. And so we're really careful about how we do that. And we really let it, we leave it to the professionals, and our stakeholders are close observers.
Right. So let's talk about the members of a community. Why, as a customer, why would I want to be involved in a community? What's my motivation? What's my incentive to be involved in a community. I'll leave this, Laura, you can comment, then Ben, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah. I think we find with consumers that, especially in communities where they're aware of the brand that's sponsoring the community, it really is the intrinsic desire to help a brand that they have some semblance of connection to. And much more so than incentives or, any other gifts or things that we may give them. That's really much more about the respect for their time than motivation itself. They love to hear the inner workings of how brands they love operate, what things are on the forefront. And frankly, the more they get into a community, the more they like interacting with us. Like when we've had those opportunities to do interviews or focus groups and they can see us and have conversations with us, I almost joke we barely even have to pay them any incentive at all to do that, because they just really want to meet the moderators. They want to meet the people behind the scenes. It really is about that sense of community and involvement, more than a transactional relationship.
That's an interesting perspective. Ben, I know you run a few communities. Why do your customers enjoy being involved in a community with one of Clorox's many brands?
Yeah, I would echo what Laura said. There's a sense of pride and a unique experience to be able to work on a brand. I think people genuinely find it interesting to do. I think they're, building on it slightly, is that there are also very unique experiences. So, there is some sort of cachet to being a secret shopper or getting your hands on products before other people. People feel really good and special about that kind of stuff. So, making sure that that's part of your community plan to sort of create those kinds of interactions is really important for a healthy community. And it gives the people that are sort of the most engaged, that extra incentive and drive to be a part of it. I think there's also sort of unique experiences that people get. Part of the communities that we run is just the open-ended engagement that community members have with each other. They're able to generate their own content and questions that have nothing to do with any of the work that we're doing, and they're able to bounce ideas off each other, get feedback on their life, their choices, all that kind of stuff. So when people really get invested, there's a lot of self-motivated rewards that come through the experience. And for those that do it, I think it's really rewarding.
So moderators, really important, obviously. And I'd love to, Amy, talk a little bit about now. So you've got some passion brands. I think in our conversation, I know you work on the Buick brand, and I had rented a Buick recently and was commenting on how impressed I was at the new Buick. So cars are kind of a passion brand, right? But I am curious, the role of the moderator in the community. How important is that role? Are what are they entrusted with, and what are just some some engagement that you've seen that are really effective in a community?
Yeah, I think the moderator is essential. I think like Ben was saying, these people feel like they kind of get to know the moderators and some of their other community members as well, which is, it builds that whole sense of community and keeps them engaged. I think the moderators are just important because it makes it more personal, and it's just, they feel like they have someone to go to if they run into any sort of issue or problem within the community. And I think that's really important. As far as engagement, I don't know, maybe Laura can answer that better than I can on some of the things that the moderators do behind the scenes that I don't even notice.
Sure, yeah. I think a lot of it starts with setting clear expectations, being really welcoming, especially at the initiation of a community, or if you're refreshing and bringing in a large number of new members, so that they understand what to expect, and that those moderators aren't just names, they're each individual real people. Like, we're here reading their responses. It's not just going into an AI machine that's spitting out results. We're reading what they have to say, And knowing that we're there and commenting on what they have to say and exploring their perceptions at a deeper level, I think that motivates them to do a better job. And what we also like to do is, especially as communities age, have members who've been around for a while serve as additional kind of buddies, welcoming people in and helping show them the ropes as well. Getting in there and they'll say, oh gosh, that's really interesting what you had to say, or, doing our job almost on our behalf, but in a way that's really fulfilling for them and exhibiting that sense of community. So really making it more than you ask, I answer, but facilitating more of the conversation that we'd really like to see.
So I think what I heard you say is it's not only really about the moderator driving engagement, it's also the moderator inviting others to continue and expand engagement where members can engage with one another too, which goes back to what Ben suggested, which is communities are human-centric. Humans having conversation with humans, right? Which is really different than a survey interaction. So let's talk a little bit about that interaction and what an insights or consumer and market insights professional can expect from a community. There's some perceptions out there. I'd like to think that they are misperceptions. I'm biased, obviously. However, let's talk a little bit about that, where there may be a misperception out there that you're not getting a fresh read. These are customers. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're not going to provide you any critical or constructive feedback. I'd like to get your take on, and I'd like to hear from all of you really, because you've all had a lot of experience with communities. Ben, what would you say to someone who's like, oh, that's going to be kind of an old read, or it's not a fresh read in communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple perspectives on that. One is, for most researchers in general, and I think it's very true of communities, is people have no problem criticizing ideas that aren't their own. So like this, there is definitely a falsehood that sort of people fall in love with the brand. And I think over time it's very quick to realize they're not going to get kicked out of the community, or there's no penalty for negative ideas. And that comfort is sort of established right away. And I think there's actually an incentive on the business to have long-standing community members. Like, you want people who understand what it's about and know the system and are free to speak their mind and fully engaged. So I think it's actually it's a plus to have long-standing community members, and there's not really a downside. I think you do have to know the kind of research you want to do. There's certain research you don't want to do in a community because they do know they're interacting with the brand, perhaps, depending on how your community is set up. So if you want Gen Pop reads, or if you want sort of broader, unbiased opinions, you would go outside your community to do that kind of work. But a lot of work can be done inside the community, and a lot of the iteration, I mean, that's what it's for, is really that iteration, and that's what they're good at. And then if you really need another sort of outside validation, you can sort of do that quickly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's a falsehood to think that people just get really nice and spit back to you what you want to hear. And especially with good moderation, half the time they don't know what the actual research brief is. So
that's great perspective. Laura, you have something?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because in a lot of my experience, especially when communities are doing, concept testing, maybe fairly repetitive, systemized ways of evaluating new ideas, it very quickly becomes apparent, as Ben has said, that, they have no problem holding back. There does tend to be this little honeymoon period at the beginning where, like, every idea you show me is cool. I'm just excited about being part of the community. But then they very quickly hit this peak where they realize, oh, you're showing me more of these. And they even compare back. Well, these aren't nearly as good as the ones you've shown me in the past. And they actually are more critical, not just being negative, but taking that holistic viewpoint into consideration and seeing the range of things that you've presented and really serving as a stakeholder in your business and not just, do I think it's good, yes or no?
So
Yeah,
Amy,
and
how
I would
do you,
say
oh, go ahead.
too, Laura, I think the way that we've done our communities is that they're fairly large communities. And a lot of times when we do like quantitative ratings and stuff like that, you are often not getting those same people. We get a small subset who takes every survey or activity that we do. So it does feel fresh, even if you are sort of, keeping some of your members for a long time. It feels fresh still, and we are always re-recruiting. Like we're always adding people to our communities. It never becomes just this one stagnant pool. At least I don't feel like that's how ours are anyway.
So, and Amy, I'm curious to hear your take on, so customers as stakeholders. Laura mentioned it. Customers as stakeholders in the success of a product, of messaging, a brand. How do you see, do you see customers as stakeholders, and how can a community drive that message?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when you are asking them very specific questions about a product or a service that they're already using, they become the stakeholder, right? They want you to fix a problem for them a lot of times. And when we're asking them for their feedback, I feel like they take it very seriously. And when you talk to these people one-on-one, you really hear it. They feel almost like a responsibility to tell you what you're doing wrong in their minds. So it becomes, they feel like they're the stakeholders because you've invited them into this community, and you trust them. You've invited them here because you trust them and you want their opinion. And you build that relationship with them that is really great. And it's what they get out of it is that, you're going to create better products for them. And I feel like a lot of them really feel like that's the purpose of it.
Interesting. Ben, you have a community, I know, that is very much about customers who are very serious about I won't divulge what the community is, but what's your take on customers wanting you as a brand, a product developer to to listen and to take their input, because it's their the way they're using the product. So customers as stakeholders, how do you find that in your communities?
Yeah, I mentioned a few times about iteration, and I think Laura talked about how if you have repetitive practices, they do sort of treat it as a holistic experience, and that they're really part of the brand. So definitely, best practices around iterating and specifically sharing back to them how you're using the work. So if there are opportunities to say, if you've been with a community long enough and you can actually get through a whole process where you've worked on something and then you launch something, you can celebrate with everybody. And that really, they just over time, people get more and more invested as a stakeholder. So the people in the community feel that they're a stakeholder. The business feels that the consumer is weighing in on the opinions and helps validate ideas and grow ideas. And it really becomes a nice cyclical process where people expect to get input, people internally expect to get input externally, people in the community expect to give input and feel like they're a part of the brand. So it's a really nice dynamic that happens.
Ben, you brought up a really interesting aspect of like the incentive, the motivation for continuing to offer input. Laura, can you comment on sharing back information with the community, whether it's brand insights that were surfaced through discussions in the community, or even product improvements or line extensions that had been made as a result of the work in the community? I'm curious to hear if you have any examples or ways that a community can do that with their members.
Yeah. Well, I think, Ben and Amy have talked about the great relationships that they have within their communities, but, there are all flavors and different types. And I've seen how quickly it can evolve into a one-way conversation. And that share back is what's so important in making them feel like a stakeholder and not just a contributor, a source of data. And so those sharebacks don't have to be extreme to be impactful. So even in very small polling type situations, just to show them what other people had to say. Like, people want to know, am I similar to my peers? Am I different from my peers? Did other people, like the choice that I picked the best just as much as I did, and why? And so we like to be very purposeful about opening up as many opportunities as possible to do that within the context of, you answer the question and you get as quickly as possible an immediate payback. But then also helping them see and encouraging the internal stakeholders to think of the community as more than surveys, more than front end, so that as a product does get close to coming to market, can we do in-home use tests? You saw it as a concept. It's not fully launched yet. We're still working on it, but we're giving you that next step of a viewpoint into it. So thinking more along that go-to-market journey, so they feel like part of the process and not just one step in a bigger process. And even just helping them know, if not the exact action you're taking, that you're taking action. So it goes back again to that they've been heard. There's someone here that's listening, and we're doing something about what they have to say. Even if it's a thank you, this was really insightful. You've shared things with us that are going to create a different shift in the way we approach this. That, even in its vagueness, can be enough to help people feel like there's a reciprocal relationship.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's a great takeaway from today, is that the share back are one of the aspects that can drive the strength of the community, and making sure it's a two-way dialogue. It's not just a one-way dialogue. Thank you. So let's shift a little bit to return on investment. Communities are an investment, right? And they're not particularly, they're not a cheap investment. Company has to, make, we know that communities grow as they have longevity. So tell me, what do we do to drive return on investment? And what are some of the ways that, not only do we realize business impact, but that we share business impact within our organizations? Amy, I'll let you comment on that first, and then I'd like to hear from Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the return on investment is that we have easier access to some of these people. There's other ways to go out and do research. They take longer typically just to find these people and recruit these people. It's not always easy. And then you have to pay them a lot more. You're paying a supplier to do all that work for you. With the community, the biggest selling point I have with my teams is just that you have more immediate access, and it's about time, and overall, I think you're probably still saving some money. I don't know how much you're saving, but it's enough that the convenience of it makes it worth it.
The convenience of having access to your customers when you want it or when you need it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Ben, any thoughts on return on investment? Yeah, and in your role as Center of Excellence, I'm sure you probably have to be the one who kind of proves return on investment at times, I would imagine, for the corporation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways to do it, and a couple ways that I talk to people about it. So there's the amount of research you can do in a community over a year. There's like the literal tracking of all the surveys you ask, and all the times you interact, and dividing the cost of the community amongst that, and providing some sort of actual tangible understanding of dollars and cents that goes into that. And if you have if you have a healthy community and you have people that under systems and by which to use it well, it's probably the best deal in research. I mean, hands down, if you are always in there. And there are times where we can be conducting 2 or 3 things a week, and the ROI is very high. The other way to sort of measure it is just sort of the affect of it. I mean, senior leadership within the organization likes to tout, as part of the human centricity that they've brought in the community, that we have this passionate base of consumers that helps us. And so when you have like a tangible thing that people point to that says, hey, here's our literal human centricity, it's, that's invaluable, really. There's no price on that one.
I really like the way you phrased that. Here it is. Proof is in the pudding, so to speak. That's great. Thank you. Laura, return on investment. How do you talk to your clients about that, and how they drive awareness of that in their organizations?
It's a strong tool to do it, but it takes planning. I mean, Ben put it great. There's processes and systems, and you're using it on a regular basis. That's how you get the ROI. It's easy to say, oh, we want a community and we'll spin one up, but not invest the manpower. You need to have someone that owns and is accountable and responsible for it within the client side team, and taking the time to inform all the internal stakeholder teams. Like it is an effort, but when you've put that effort into place, it's so easy. I think it does speak for itself, not just in the consumer voice, but especially in organizations that are just starting to spin up their insights departments. I've seen even the very first activity within a community, stakeholders bring a question that they said, gosh, our habit is we would sit at a table and we'd all vote and we'd pick a decision, but now we're putting it into the community, and a week later, wow, they actually chose something different than what we would have chose. And that just takes off the demand for wanting to use and engage in that way. But it really does require setting up those systems to reap the benefits.
So setting up systems, making sure utilization is appropriate. And making sure that you kind of know how much maybe you'd be spending otherwise. So all of our panelists had a little bit of a different take on that. Thank you very much for your insights. So last question, coming out of COVID, insights professionals are probably a little bit tired of being asked what's going to happen, what's going to stick, what's not going to stick. And I think most of us were in a situation where, like, I don't have a crystal ball, but I know the customer. So with that in mind, what's the future of communities? Where are communities going? Will they continue to be an important vehicle for insights? Will they morph? Will they change? I'm very curious to hear all of our panelists. Just, you can noodle a little bit and maybe pull out your crystal ball, and there's no wrong answer. As the one thing we've learned in the last year is you never say never, and you just don't know what's around the corner. But Laura, what's the future of communities?
Well, I think we've seen consumers are more vocal than ever about what they want the brands in their lives to be doing. So interest in communities, I think, will only go up. And especially, we just don't have the patience as consumers anymore to do long survey engagements. To do a 2-hour focus group and expect people to drive to a facility, I think that's going to be a rare past, still necessary at times, but online sessions are the way of the future, and that's so easy to do through communities. And the just bite-sized research, not everything needs to be a 20 and 30-minute survey. And when you have the community and that easy access to consumers, it's meeting them where they are and letting them participate in ways that fit into their life. And, it's similar to how they want to act in all ways in life, right? We don't want to go into the office anymore. We don't want to go to places. We want things to come to us, and community comes to the consumer.
Thank you. Ben, future of communities.
I think it's bright. I think research technology in general is bright and amazing. I'm sort of blown away. The last 3, 4, 5 years, it's just really fun to be a researcher right now, and how much has changed. And I think communities are a great way to blend that tech and like a strong group of people that you can trust. So I think, not only is there iteration just, in your business ideas with communities, but there's ways of working iteration that can happen. And I think that the future of that with communities, and for Clorox and the brands that we have, being able to try new things, try new research methods, and really make progress that way, I think it's going to be really continue to be fun and exciting.
Amy, you introduced yourself with, I've been involved in research and communities for 24 years. So I've saved you for last.
Oh,
So
no.
after 24 years, what's the next 25 years look like for communities?
I mean, I think they'll just keep evolving. And I do think that the video element will continue to grow. I think COVID's forced everyone to be comfortable with being online and being on a camera. I mean, even me. And I feel like that's a huge way that it will evolve. And I think talking directly to customers face to face, using the community as a way to get to them is probably, I feel like that's where we're going. That's where our company wants to see these customers talking. And maybe it's just because they're used to it in their personal life now of kind of seeing someone react, via camera. I feel like that's the next couple of years, at least. I think that'll be huge.
That's a very interesting insight. It's something that we're becoming accustomed to. So panelists, we do have some questions from the audience. I'm gonna pitch it out there. I would love some additional granularity on how you work with internal SMEs. So subject matter experts probably want access to communities. We did touch on it. Laura, do you have any insights about how how a community, not only moderators, but we call it the MROC team, Market Research Online Community Team, how they interact with SMEs in an organization?
Well, I think it depends on the organization's comfort level with those SMEs being directly involved in the community. So in some scenarios, there will be an insights professional that sits in between, so there may be little or no interaction. In others, we're serving as the conduit, even the extension of the bandwidth for that insights team to be able to speak with that SME and really help understand in research terms how we can translate their business needs into research objectives. And so it really is about facilitating that conversation and being consultative within each of those SME areas to make sure we're meeting their individual needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amy, you did talk about giving your engineers access to your communities and whether or not you allow. Do you have it? Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Ben or Amy, any comments on working with SMEs in your organization and the community?
Happy to jump in. So, we treat our community as a sort of research tool in the toolbox. So at least in the way our organization runs, the insights professionals are partnered with different cross-functional teams. Certain insights professionals have their own terms of methodological expertise. And it really is, training and understanding of what the community can do and being a consultant to your partners on best practices on how to use it, when to use it, why to use it, and when not to use it. It's just as important. So it is I would say it's a fairly traditional interaction of an insights person with their team as if it was any other methodology. So when would you do in-home usage testing? When would you do anything else? Being that consultant of understanding the business problem and then giving your recommendations on which tool to go use to solve the problem.
Great, thank you. A very tactical question. So in terms of FTEs, how many FTEs do I need, full-time employees do I need to run a community?
Depends on the size of the community.
Yeah. And the volume of work, I guess, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we've always, like the community that we have right now, I have one person who spends maybe 70% of their time doing community stuff.
Okay, yeah.
It really depends also. I mean, a lot of it's all sort of cost value equation of how much can be outsourced and how much is insourced and what you consider dedication to the actual community itself, but I don't think you actually need any single person who only does communities. I think it's definitely part of somebody's responsibility, as long, I think, and most community providers will have some sort of account team that's going to help you. So it's probably 0 full-time, but like spread across a couple people or one person. I think it all depends.
I think one of the things that we did here as a key takeaway is that you have to set expectations. You have to kind of want to know your expected outcomes for the community, what you're looking to understand. And I think once that is established, just about any community provider, whether it's a technology company or a full service market research agency providing professional services to help you run your community, there are lots of different ways to access those services. And there's lots of other companies that choose to do it themselves. Laura, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, well, I think having that plan is so critical. All too often, you know, we'll have conversations that are early stage that an organization wants a community because they hear all these ROI benefits and great ways of bringing consumers to life, but they don't know who they want to speak to or how often or for what or which stakeholders would use it. So I think that critical thinking at the upfront of what do we want to achieve, that's the difference between a successful community that takes off and, to your point earlier, Polly, grows over time versus one that the organization feels like, well, why did we do this? Because we're trying to find activities to keep the community busy, right? Planning first, community building after.
Great. I hope that provided some insights as to what kind of team you can leverage to run a community. In our conversation today, we've talked about, of course, insights professionals using communities. We talked a little bit about UX using communities and interacting with them. Someone in our audience is interested to understand how innovation teams can leverage insights in a community.
I mean, our innovation team uses it to do brainstorming. So that's been one of the main ways that they've used it, and to do initial concept screening to understand, is there value in this concept, or how could I make this concept better, or, you know, even if it's just how I describe it or how I present it to people. So they use the community for things like that a lot.
Yeah, and even early stage, just understanding how consumers live their lives. And I know, Ben, you spoke about this. It's understanding who they are as people inspires innovation. So it can be used at very front end as well.
I agree. I think innovation is one of the strongest use cases for a community, but it's definitely the upfront side. So it's the understanding lifestyle behaviors, understanding needs, understanding motivations, and then iteration in terms of actual concepts and prototyping is where I think it really shines, because it's so fast with the technology that we have now. So a really strong recommendation of communities for insights teams, especially if you have good process where you're using external vendors to provide all that iteration now. You can do a very clear transition over and understand sort of those use cases and ROI discussions.
Right. So lots of use cases for innovation teams as well. So we're just about getting to the end of our time today. Thank you so much for your company for the last just under an hour. We've had a great and lively discussion about how communities drive customer centricity. Ben Jordan, Amy Brazel, and Laura Musinski, thank you so much for your expertise and sharing today. I've really enjoyed your company. And thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us at FC Connect. We have the rest of today and all of tomorrow to talk more about insights, communities, innovation, technology. So I highly encourage you to check out some of our other sessions as well. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks.